You'll also note that sin entered into the world. It did not originate with Adam. Satan had already failed in his cosmic rebellion against God in heaven. And when he disobeyed, sin entered into the world and death through sin. And so with sin, there is always death. And God had said in Genesis 2, verse 17, "In the day that you eat of this fruit, you shall surely die." And the moment he disobeyed God, not only did sin enter the human race, but death entered as well. And there was an immediate death for Adam, a spiritual death. But with that spiritual death, there would eventually come physical death. And were it not for the grace of God, there would be eternal death. And so Adam opened the door to sin, and sin opened the door to death. And so we read in verse 12, so death spread to all men. It spread like a malignant cancer, and it spread to every human being in the human race, beginning at the moment of conception. And then he adds, because all sinned. And at the moment that Adam sinned, his offense, his sin, was imputed to every person that would ever be conceived in their mother's womb. And so when did you become a sinner? Over 6,000 years ago, Adam's sin was charged to your account. And long before you were conceived and long before you entered into this world, you were already condemned, and you were already under the wrath of God, and you were already a sinner. This imputation of Adam's sin, it was immediate. It took place to the entire human race, once and for all at that point. It was comprehensive. It went to every member of the human race. It was realistic in the sense that we were charged as though we ourselves had committed that sin. It was fatal in that it brought death, and it was representative in the sense that the one man acted on behalf of the many. And this is reinforced 5 more times here in Romans chapter 5 in the following verses. And I want to let your eye go down the page from verse 15 to verse 19, and I want you to see verse 15, where it says, by the transgression of the one, the many died. Adam's one transgression brought death to the entire human race. Verse 16, the judgment arose from one transgression, resulting in condemnation, the divine punishment and judgment of God on the entire human race. Verse 17, we read, by the transgression of the one, death reigned. And death reigned like a cruel tyrant and has ruled over the human race from the time of Adam's sin. It's appointed that a man wants to die, and after this, the judgment. In verse 18, we read in Romans 5, through one transgression there resulted condemnation to all men. And so eternal condemnation and eternal punishment was declared by God against every member of the human race long before they were conceived or born. And then in verse 19 we read, through the one man's disobedience, referring to Adam's disobedience, the many were made sinners, because his sin was imputed to every person, and we were charged as guilty before God before we entered the human race. This is the doctrine of imputation, that the action of one man is regarded as the actions of the many others. And it is based upon the principle of federal headship, that the action of a representative head would affect all those whom he represents. And Adam was our representative head, and his actions would be accredited to us and would be imputed to us. And so his one act has condemned the entire human race to the end of the age, till the last person is conceived in the womb. And this speaks volumes of the holiness of God, that just one sin would condemn the entire human race. Just one sin by one man, and the entire future population of the world stood judged and condemned before God. That's how holy God is. And that is how sinful one act of rebellion against this holy God is taken seriously by Almighty God. One sin by one man, and the entire human race condemned.